I'm going to give you 3 different percentages. And the question is, what percentage of buyers have an AI mandate? So this is they're being instructed to go buy software that has an AI component to it as part of company goals. Is it 33%, 57%, or 91%?
91%.
Whoa. There's also this perception of the job of AI is to make things cheaper to do. This perception of a cost-saving component to AI. So if you're adopting an AI, especially on the tool side, if you're adopting an AI tool, there's this expectation of some kind of cost savings involved. Yeah. And this is even true on this as well. You see...
What's up? Welcome to the B2B Content Show, episode 3, where we talk all about B2B content, making better B2B content, LinkedIn, what's happening in LinkedIn, what's the current news of LinkedIn, and also some B2B marketing. And today we got a lifelong product marketer turned founder, Drew Giovannoli. How'd I do?
You did pretty poor. Yeah, Drew Giovannoli.
Drew Giovannoli.
Giovannoli.
Founder Giovannoli.
He's got it.
No, this is a running joke. Is Jake has some trouble with names sometimes.
Yeah, I got like a stutter and bad pronunciation, but
it's all right.
That's why his co-founder's name is onomatopoeia.
Ding.
Easy. So Drew, just give us like 10 seconds what Varied Wins does, your company.
Yeah, we help businesses find out why they're losing winnable deals by doing interviews of their buyers, right? So we interview people who went through the buying process, find out their perceptions of them versus the competitors.
What are some outstanding stats of what you're learning? You just put out a big campaign that you're pushing heavily. It's called Buyer Truth with Jen Allen-Knuthm.
That's right.
And you guys put out a bunch of stats about what buyers are missing or what sellers are missing in the buying process.
So we did a research of 172 buyers, half mid-market, half enterprise, which is 20 million to 250 million or 250 million up, half technical, half business. Just looking at, not from the seller's point of view, but from a buyer's point of view, how do they buy? What do they care about? Everything from how prepared do they expect people to be? How often are they staying with the current incumbent vendor? What really makes them buy? And the idea was, Jen is an expert in how do you go sell? How do you do discovery? How do you do prospecting? We're an expert in buyer research. So you put it together, if you want to grow a business, if you know your buyers and you learn how to sell them, you're going to do pretty well. You asked about stats, and a bunch of stuff jumped out. One of the biggest being people are actively staying with vendors they know are worse than the other options out there. 62%, in fact. And the reasons why, you think a lot of times it'd be price based on the way people just discount to try to win a deal. But only 18% of the people who didn't switch was because of price. 51% was because of the implementation effort. And so you should look at, are you selling against fees? Or are you selling against functionality? Or are you selling against comfort and trust and a lack of inertia, people not wanting to move? When we do win-loss interviews, what we hear a lot is about the buying experience, that it's not so much about, was it this integration that they had, but hey, this competitor, they brought their CEO on the call, in the second call, and made us feel special. And that was a reflection how we thought we were going to get treated once we became a customer, right? So it's a lot. I think people boil down in buying software to like features and price, and we found it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, I think that tracks with a lot of people in sales will complain about, my territory is not good, our product's bad in this way, we don't have this integration, and we're losing. And it seems like the locus of control is always external in those complaints.
Yeah.
Right? But I think what this report has discovered is that there is a skill issue component, there's a skill gap, where if you run a tight process, if you get early executive alignment, if you're doing things the right way, you're previewing in your sales process what it's like to work with you post-sale. And I think there's perhaps more control that the sales rep can have than a lot of people think.
Totally. There was a research stat that only 15% of the buyers of software felt like their sales reps were very well prepared for the sales call.
Yeah. So when I was looking through, by the way, I got to shout out the way that you have the report set up. Most of the time I go with some gated form. I'm signing up for SDR bot outreach. And I download a PDF that looks like a white paper. But I love how navigable your research paper is. There's a landing page. You even have graphics that I could download and reshare with some of the key findings, which I thought was very well presented.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it was important to me. Number one, that's ungated, because I think that's kind of old school. Even if you sign up for my email list, like you don't I want to hear from you. You want to hear from me, we'll build the trust, the right time to reach out. It's not saying I'm not going to retarget you with ads on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But like I want as many people to see the content as possible. And then I wanted as many people to share the content as possible. So I made every stat downloadable, shareable. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
of
you
course.
for noticing. I
And
realized it all.
I want a follow-up question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so Drew, when you say that only 15% of sellers are showing up on these calls extremely prepared, what do you mean by that? How is that different than being unprepared or being a little prepared?
Yeah, so it's an interesting stat because it is the perception of buyers which we tested, right?
Right.
It wasn't like, hey, did you show? We didn't measure preparedness based on
This is like qualitative.
Yeah, this
metric,
isn't like,
yeah.
oh, they brought competitive research and they knew what we sell and they knew my personal interest. This was just, as a buyer, how well prepared do you feel like buyers are? And so maybe it's the preparation, maybe it's the way they're presenting the preparation, but what it tells me is that if buyers felt that only 15% of the sellers were very well prepared, that's a gap. So if you are the one who is prepared, you can be the one to come coach them, right? You can be the one to engage them. And I can look up the stat in a second, but most people are coming with some benchmarking of you against the competitor.
Yeah.
So it's your job actually to shift perception. And a lot like the work we do, I think a lot about like, why does my business exist? Like, how do we stop it from not existing? Because there's brilliant people at a lot of these tech companies making decisions about how to grow. And they know who the competitors are. They know their strengths and weaknesses. Like, why does this research matter? And it's because people aren't buying based on reality. They're buying based on the perception of them versus the competitor. And so what great research does, especially like win-loss research, buyer research, is it figures out that perception so that you can go shape it.
Yeah, and I want to chime in on your research report because it is the B2B content show, and we did want to highlight the buyer truth as a piece of B2B content. We put a ton of effort into, we'll show it on screen, Jesse, what we have going on right now with 2026 buyer truths. You have a full report. You interviewed 172 software buyers, so it's like legit data.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of infographics, so a lot of like stats are popping to me right now.
Yeah.
A podcast, more, and then how to get more information. So you have this sick piece of B2B content on a landing page. And then you also did a really good job of distributing this piece of content. Tell me a little bit about the distribution strategy with this one piece of B2B content you spent a lot of time.
Yeah, sure. Well, it started with finding the partner in Jen who was selling a complimentary service so we could both get a value out of this, but not be capitalizing on each other's, like we, in a positive way, helping each other out, growing our audiences and our reach and trust. Once I had her as a partner and the idea of the research, then it's like, cool, how do we get out into the world? So the first is like, let's get in a format that is very shareable. How else do we get out in the world? One, I hosted the Product Marketing Alliance here in Austin as an MC, where Tux went all in for it and didn't talk about my business. I talked about the research, right? And they're also going to be sending an email out to all the attendees with that information. I'm going to Chicago in a few weeks to sponsor a sales assembly dinner with Matt Green. Again, we're going to talk about the research there. In addition to that, there's going to be a fair bit of like LinkedIn ads. And a lot of the advertisements are first just thought leadership ads about the content. So we're making sure my target audience sees the content coming from Jen and I. And then we're retargeting on the website as well. Heading into month like 2, 2.5, 3, we will start retargeting people with probably conversation ads. Say, hey, you saw how 172 people bought software in the past year. Would you like to learn about how and why they're buying your software? Come engage with us at Buried Wins and we can learn about your buyers. So that's kind of the distribution strategy to move from thought leadership awareness and then into more conversion cycle.
Yeah, you were talking about some of the, if you're okay sharing this, what's the budget for this project?
I think the whole campaign is something around $50,000. The research itself, coming from the person who does the research and owns it, cost me about $12,000 to put together and collect the research. That is direct payment for survey responses. So that doesn't include obviously like me building the site, doing the analysis, like all of that. It's just pure raw costs to an in-house researcher. And then on top of that, there's like sponsorships of these dinners. So these and the events, those are ranging from like $5,000 to $15,000 a pop. We'll probably spend $10,000 on LinkedIn ads to get our messages, the report out into the world, and then reintroduce buried wins as part of that in the solution. So yeah, probably something like $50,000. And we're doing well as a company, but that, it's taking a lot of profits off the table and just putting them back into the business. And that doesn't include all, we spent a lot of money recently on product, showed you guys kind of off camera and some of the stuff we're working on there. But, you got to risk it to get the biscuit.
Dang. Let me do a hook for that real quick. You just launched a research report. Can you break down what the cost and investment looks like, both from conducting the report itself, but also the various associated moving pieces of getting the report out there?
I think it's important because like a lot of times it's just pie in the sky, right? We're just saying, we're doing this. I think it's helpful to actually break down.
Yeah.
So this is actually, this could be a clip too. So as we do the podcast live, because we're doing a lot of prep work and research about you beforehand to formulate some of our conversation points.
Yeah.
But it is helpful.
It's like how you're in sales.
When you're that's right. We're the 15%.
Yeah.
But there's always that push and pull on a live podcast taping of we want this to feel like a conversation as well, but we also want to optimize for the clips. And when you have organic social, your hook is very important. The specific verbiage and the order of words, both from a credibility, relevance standpoint, is you need to show some of that. So it's hard to both talk or naturally and not be stilted, but also check all those boxes for social media. So that's why, like, as we're having this organic conversation, sometimes I'll pause and I'll say, here's the hook for it. We may cut it from the long form. This meta conversation here, it might be another clip as well.
Even one of our best performing clips recently, we were like messing around with the hook for a bit. And that turned out to be a great clip. So we got to break the fourth wall a little bit and work on their social distribution.
No, it's great. I'm learning from you guys too, because we have 2 podcasts out as of this week, and it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, but it's on YouTube too, right? And we're grabbing all the original content, making it vertical, trying to find those spots of interest. So
that could be an interesting AI use case even of with Synthesia and some of these other tools. You could take the raw recording of the footage and then train that model and then use it to overdub the vocals later. This different type of wording. Because sometimes what happens is we'll ask a question, or I do this a lot. I get asked a question on a podcast for someone else. I go on a huge tangent. I talk about this, and my answer at the end of the day ends up being different than what they asked. Sure. So that's a way you could backdoor a more relevant hook to the substance and the meat of this hot track. Yeah.
It seems like in podcasts, a lot of times too, they'll lead with like, you'll start the podcast, they'll lead with like a hook from the interviewee, and then they'll kind of leave you hanging. They get back to where did that start? What was the question? What led to it?
But I think it's helpful breaking down how much effort goes into that content you did, and then how much you're actually spending or working on distributing that content.
Yeah. I mean, I think it started with, all great research starts with what do you want to know? What are you trying to ask? Because there's a fantastic quote, which is, a well-defined question is a question half answered.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So whether you're doing win-loss research, whether you're doing just research for your business at all, having a clear picture of why you're doing the research and what the goals are. And so that's, Jen and I worked together on that for a long time. And then it's targeting is the second most important piece. It's, for this report, we wanted people who had made a purchase decision in the last 12 months. It had to be above $15,000, even though 82% of them were above $50,000. I wanted to be able to slice and dice the data between technical buyers and non-technical buyers. I wanted to do enterprise versus mid-market. So if you don't think about that in advance, you can't chop it up later and get the insights you want later. And same things with like win-loss research. Whenever we do it, we interview the head of sales, the head of marketing, head of product first, because we want to make sure the research is tied to real business objectives. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're going to end up with some like academic report that sits in Google Drive and is like never read.
Totally. Yeah. We're going to test a little game show right now. We're going to test some stats, see how good a memory you got.
Of the stats in my report?
Yeah.
How about I test you guys?
Okay, let's do that.
You guys guess what the reports were.
There we go. Drew's going to test us on some buyer stats.
I'm going to give you 3 different percentages. And the question is, what percentage of buyers have an AI mandate? So this is they're being instructed to go buy software that has an AI component to it as part of company goals.
100%.
All right. Is it 33%, 57%, or 91%.
91%.
91%.
57%.
Whoa, that's
Oh,
interesting.
wow.
Yeah, so 57% of buyers said, hey, you have to go find a great AI solution to help us achieve this. I think what's interesting about this stat is that for buyers who did have this AI mandate, they switched vendors 2 times more than people who didn't have AI mandate. So they're being forced to go look at tools, and I think a lot of these AI native tools feel different than the tools that they're latching AI on. Also, though, they were 5 times more likely to choose the lowest price. I think that's especially interesting. I think it's because our mind ties AI usage to ChatGPT and Claude.
Yep.
$20 a month.
Yep.
Right? And so a tool like Profound, which is a like AEO, GEO, whatever you want to call it, SEO, I think it's like $800, $900 a month. It's a tool to help you track your AI performance. There's AI involved, but like I think we have actually had this like view of AI almost as a commodity when it comes to processing.
Yeah, I think there's also this perception of the job of AI is to make things cheaper to do, right? Like there's this perception of a cost saving component to AI. So if you're adopting an AI, especially on the tool side, if you're adopting an AI tool, there's this expectation of some kind of cost savings involved.
Yeah.
And this is even true on the service side as well. You see a lot of vendors now, there's this pushback or pressure to, this is really big in consulting right now, right? It's like you see the average contracts go down. It's like, hey, you have less humans in the loop, there's less man hours. And if your whole industry was previously charging on hours billed, then adding AI in the loop, it creates this perception.
I love those stats that are like, I was able to fire my whole like X team, and it's like, hey, I got rid of my like HubSpot account and all these other things. So now instead of paying $30,000 a year, $100,000 a year, I spend like $400,000 a year on AI like check-ins, right? And I have to maintain and upkeep all of it. Like it's very part. I think that we are moving to a world where AI doesn't necessarily mean or shouldn't mean a cheaper option. It's just the right option sometimes when that automation makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, ready for another stat?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. What percentage of buyers have researched how you stack up against competitors heading into that first call? Is it 12%, 31%, or 51%?
They did research before the call.
They
did research better.
Specifically, how you stacked up against competitors before that very first
Probably
call.
not that many.
So I want to, if I was basing it on myself, when I evaluate, when I'm being a buyer, I tend to do a lot of research.
Yeah.
But I imagine that's probably less true across the board.
think-
So I'll go 50.
I think a lot. Yeah,
I'll go 31%.
I'm saying 31 too, but I say like a lot of times you're just kind of like getting a recommendation. Maybe there might not be more than 2 really good recommendations.
The answer was 51%.
Oh, interesting.
So over half
Wow.
of people are coming to that first call with at least a perception of how you fit against competitors. And so it's your job to guide them and,
perception.
and shape that
You said
perception.
perception.
Perception is a word.
Yeah. Well, we're 0 for 2 now, Jake. So hopefully we can redeem
go.
ourselves.
I'm glad I'm like structuring it in a way
That's good. Yeah.
not getting-
You're a good little game show guy. Not
Okay.
little, but you're a good game show guy.
The question is, what percentage of buyers picked the cheapest option?
Ooh.
So right, this was a binary question about a software they bought in the past year that was at least 15 grand and up. Was it 37%, 57%, or 73% picked the lowest price option?
You're like trying to trick.
I know
us.
Chris Voss says don't do it. I'm gonna split the difference here and go 57%.
Okay.
I'm gonna do the coin flip. That's what 57.
Okay. 73% of people did not pick the lowest priced option.
73%.
Did not pick the lowest priced option.
Why not?
Well, here's what I can tell you. Of the people who did not pick the lowest price option, who picked like a premium option, if I think that's fair to say, of those, 39% of those buyers paid more. Who paid more said case studies had the biggest impact on their decision. So external referrals, trust.
Case studies.
69% of buyers who paid more chose a seller who proactively identified risks for them. So it was like not only a coach about the product, but about the pain point and the internal selling. And then 79% of buyers who paid more chose a seller who helped them navigate internal buy-in. So what this tells me is that selling, again, is not about features and functionality. It's being a coach around the problem they need to solve and help guiding them through it. And then people are willing to pay more for that.
Yeah, episode 1, we had a whole rant about case studies because they're so underrated in the buying process, right? You got to
Totally.
you got to arm the team with stuff, with content to help them sell.
Absolutely.
Case studies
Buyer
are great.
enablement. I'll share a quick story of my time at Yelp when I was the Chinese translator. So our marketing department didn't have any localization, and we didn't pay anyone external, but I spoke and wrote the language. So we had a bunch of sales decks and research reports that were in English, and reps were using them on deals in English, and then they were getting good results out of it. Nothing existed for the Chinese side of the market. So I went and manually translated a lot of those decks and papers to Chinese, and then also did a lot of calls 2-3 a.m. To get China time to bring more people into the conversation.
Yeah.
That otherwise no one else was taking those middle of the night calls.
Totally.
And to me that was my personal experience of doing more buyer enablement, and because we had a champion internally, a lot of these accounts really wanted the tool. But it was hard for someone where your whole company's speaking Mandarin Chinese to buy from an American company.
Totally.
So that, and even if you don't speak another language, there's a lot of ways that you could do this as well. So it definitely resonates.
That's a great story. I'll end with 2 other stats about case studies or building trust. One is that case studies and references hit even harder with technical audiences. So the percentage who felt like case studies were a very high influence on their decision, 60% of business buyers, but 79% of technical buyers felt like it highly influenced their decisions, right? So if you're in a technical market, it's even more important. And then I'll add one more, which is about building buyer trust. This is actually slightly different than the stats we were just talking about. This is how to build trust in mid-market and enterprise. And in mid-market, it's kind of balanced across the board. Product trials in both cases were the top way to build trust.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting here to think about PLG used to be for like small mid-market companies, sign up and try and use it. I think it's kind of pervasive across everyone now that they need to build trust with you and mitigate risk by getting their hands on the product, getting their teams to use it. Fairly balanced throughout. The top proof point in mid-market is product trial, where 30% of them felt like it was the greatest impact on their final decision, but 46% of enterprise buyers, so at companies with 250 million more in ARR, said that product trials were the proof type that had the greatest impact on their final decision. So case studies are in there; they're all like part of the mix. But actually, the top thing overall was just getting your hands on the product.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to sell seats when a lot of your team's already using it. I mean, I think that was a good use case. Even if you just look at a lot of the LLM tools. Right, it's like early on, everyone had their ghost account of ChatGPT on their personal computers, right? Because early on, that was a big security risk of, are we going to allow our employees to use this? Can they only use the company-sponsored one? And then as they're selling, and counter-selling of, you have your incumbent, but most of your team's using our tool to do their work.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing some stats.
Hell yeah.
I wish me and Dean weren't 0 for 3, but it's all good.
All good.
We just had Drew on the show, but we're back.
That's right. We're back now. Talking about other things in B2B content world.
Yeah.
What's your breakdown of talking to Drew and what he's doing right now?
I think it's interesting thinking about the fact it's him and Jen that are doing this, right? Because I think Jen has always been very much on the seller side, optimizing for improving the sales process. And Drew, on the other hand, he was a product marketer. He was in-house, serving on the marketing side, probably interfacing with a lot more buyers. And I think this is really the first research report where you had the two sides come together, experts in both domains, joining forces to create a comprehensive research report. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and obviously Jen Allen-Knuthm is very well known in the LinkedIn space, B2B sales space. So I think it really helped with the credibility of the research, helped with the credibility of the research report as well.
Yeah.
Which I think adding authority figures along with your content is really really important. So I think that was a big takeaway for me that he did it in pair with Jen.
Yeah,
and it definitely added credibility to that.
Something else I appreciated about the way he was talking and thinking about the research report, especially with the launch, if you notice his cost breakdown, a lot of that budget went beyond just conducting the research report, right? I think that was only ended up being about 20% of the total expenditure. A lot of that went into distribution, putting paid ads behind it. It's like you can spend all the money you want making the best content in the world, but if your strategy doesn't encompass getting it in front of the right audience, it's pointless.
Yeah, well, so it's 50K total budget, 12K was actually to make the content, and the rest was basically for distribution, working with partners to get it out. So what's that rough estimate? I don't know, like 75% is on distribution. So before Drew, before we were on camera, we were talking a little bit about the campaign and hearing how he was distributing the content. So it's dope to hear him on camera, break it down a little bit further.
Yeah. One other piece I really enjoyed was when he was talking about how case studies are a big needle mover, especially on the technical side. That's something that I didn't have the data beforehand.
Yeah.
We know that case studies are important. That's something that we do a lot of at Event Shark, but specifically for a technical buyer, the fact that there's such a gap between the efficacy there. And I think it's well known in B2B that oftentimes your technical buyer is the hardest person to sell to.
100%.
So I think that's a good segue into talking about case studies and testimonials. What do you think goes into a good case study?
Good customer.
Good customer? Yeah, that's pretty important. If your customer doesn't like you, it can be tough.
Let's look at the use case of the case study, right? I think even what we were talking about with Drew and how there's technical buyers, right? There should be case studies for different product suites or different suites in the product. Or different products in the suite, because there's so many different use cases. It's hard to get the full sell in 5 minutes, right? But it's almost going to start. I can see case studies being like almost like how many times do you want to hop on with a sales rep and do a 30-minute demo? I'd rather just watch like 5 case studies that go in depth of the product, online demos, kind of just arming the buyer with content beforehand. Yeah. What do you have to say that goes into a good case study?
So I think if you look at the practical application of a case study, really what you're trying to do is show some type of similarity or look-alike situation. When you have the demo or when you speak to a sales rep, oftentimes that's very product focused, or if they're a bad sales rep. If they're a good sales rep, they dive a little deeper, right? But I think the main thing is when companies are evaluating a purchase and looking at case studies, what they're really looking for is how similar is this company in the case study to us? How similar is their situation, the problem? And if it's a good match, then that I'm getting data and evidence that this tool I'm evaluating can solve my specific problem. I think that's the number one question that needs to be answered. Is this other situation where there is a success story similar enough to my use case that I can reasonably expect a similar positive outcome? And so that goes into our framework for when we help our clients conduct case studies. When I started in sales, so I always like to look at case studies and testimonials from a sales point of view, because we both come from sales. During my early days in sales, a big influence on me was Rackman's spin selling, situation, pain, implication, need. And that's a framework that I've carried forth into content, into marketing of you always want to start with the situation and context. It's not enough to just talk about the product itself and the implementation of the tool, right? Again, to my earlier point of you want to create a lookalike analog to show the similarity in circumstance between the two use cases. So you start with the situation, what brought them here? What problem were you experiencing? And what was the context of them evaluating, bringing onboarding into that tool?
So there's basically 3 parts.
Yep.
How it was before, what are you doing now to fix it, the result.
Yep. So yeah, situation, and then you go into your problem. Okay, so this thing is going on right now. You have a leaky funnel somewhere. What is that impact on your business operations? What's the impact on your profitability? What's the impact on your sales win rate? And you could drill down into the specific business outcome, because it's not enough to just say we have this problem. That is a symptom, not the disease, right? And so you go from symptom and then you diagnose the disease. And then for the next point is, what is it like after having the solution? Okay, you've brought it on. What's the change? Now you're using this tool. Okay, did it solve the problem? But it's not enough to just say, okay, we started using this tool, it solved the problem. What's the downstream impact of that? Now that that problem is solved, we already touched on the pain and the business impact of having the problem. So that's the negative impact. So what's the positive impact of having solved that problem? That's step 3. And then 4 for us, I think it's another important thing is, especially in highly commoditized or competitive deal cycles, it's not enough to just say this thing solved our problem or it has some semblance of fixing the issue. There's also an element of what is the experience like working with that company? Am I getting good onboarding and support? If I have a question or there's a product issue or there's some integration that's not working, how quickly can I get support to address my problems?
I like, even when it comes to content, having the problem as the hook.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? Using the problem as like a hook for content.
I think it's very important. It follows the best practices of YouTube in some ways, right? It's this concept of an open and closed loop. You build intrigue by setting the stage with the problem. If you're immediately going to the solution, one, the viewer doesn't have enough context. Again, to my earlier point, they can't identify as easily, is this something similar to me? If you're just talking about, well, here's a technical challenge and here's a technical solution on how that was solved, you're not addressing the similarity, the lookalike factor.
I mean, I think some of the best content we've created or seen in the market is starting with a problem, and then clients or people can see themselves in that problem, and then that's where they have that watch through to see the rest of the content, and then ultimately buy the product.
Well, it's like the very overused framework of the hero's journey. I think that's how you apply that to a case study customer video of that whoever is the solution, they're the wizard, they're the Merlin. Here's the sword, Excalibur, go slay the dragon and rescue the princess. The hero, the King Arthur, is the customer.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a really good framework of setting up a piece of content, a case study, what have you, to follow that storyline.
We got a weekly segment. Ding's going to break down corporate buzzwords or some slogan or word of the week.
Esoteric word of the week. So it wasn't a corporate buzzword in so much as just a vocab word this week I've been using a lot. So Dylan on our team, he does a word of the week. This is not his word of the week, but my word of the week is sprezzatura, which is an Italian word for elegant, laid-back fashion, where you're not trying too hard, right? It doesn't just apply to fashion, but I think this is very true in content and in marketing, of people over-optimize for perfection. You want every element of this to be polished, and oftentimes one that adds some time and friction to actually getting the piece of content done. But 2, it can come across as stilted or contrived in a way. And when people overuse the term authenticity, but I think what they really mean is you should try hard, but you can't look like you're trying too hard. And that's the concept of Sprezzatura, in which it's about knowing the rules so you can break them, right? I have an Oxford cloth button-down dress shirt where I have an extra button unbuttoned. I'm not wearing a tie under a silk blazer.
Yeah. So you're not trying too hard, right?
I'm not trying too hard. It's like I am trying, right? But I'm wearing jeans and some sneakers today instead of the full getup. So I feel a little, like I'm breaking the rules. Like, you're not supposed to have this combination, but I'm just being me.
That's right.
Yeah. Sprezzatura.
Sprezzatura.
Drew Giovannoli.
Drew Giovannoli. Sprezzatura. Use some Sprezzatura.
Mamma mia.
I kind of like, let's get rid of the word authentic. Let's get rid of the word authenticity and use Sprezzatura. Sprezzatura?
Yeah.
Effortless or Tura?
Tura. Sprezzatura. Effortless style.
All right. So that was episode 3 of the B2B Content Show.
Shout out to Drew
Giovannoli. We're going to film an episode potentially tonight for episode 4, which is going to be a banger. Peace out.